Bona tarda a tothom. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We have this very special session for us because it's our first session at the UPF Center for Animal Ethics with people here again, back with flesh and bodies here. So we are very, very happy. As you know, we have first Ed Winters with us, who I don't know if you need I introduce him because I think there is lots of fans here. Ed is a food activist, also a writer, also an entrepreneur, and one of those wonderful beings fighting for animal defense and animal rights. And when we had the opportunity to have him here, we were very excited. And what we have planned is to have him talking for around 30 minutes, and then we will have a panel with the co-founder of HeuraFoods, Bernat Añaños, and a member of the Center for Animal Ethics, Daniela, who is our expert on the protein transition and animal rights, which is our topic today. And at the end of the session, we, of course, will have like 15 minutes for questions, answers, or comments about whatever you want to say. So, I give you the floor. Thank you, Ed.
Yeah. Gracias. I've been practicing. Thank you so much. That was lovely. Thank you for the introduction. And thank you to all of you for being here. I have to tell you, this is the largest event I've done in person since before the pandemic. So thank you. It's really amazing. Thank you to Tati. She is my assistant. And let me tell you that I don't know how I get up in the morning without Tati, right? She is just amazing. Like, she's so awesome. So thank you so much for organizing me being here as well. And thank you to the Heura team, yeah? That's close enough? Close enough, all right. Thank you so much for inviting me and for being a part of this panel and for everything that you do, because I've been in Barcelona for a little while now, and the products are so good. Like, honestly, I mean, I don't need to tell you guys, right? You already know. But they're so delicious, so bien. Yeah? Okay. I'm going to speak for about half an hour or so, maybe 25 minutes, and I'm going to talk about a few different things, and then obviously we'll talk a little bit more in depth about many of these things when we have the panel afterwards. And so we thought that to start with, it would be nice to talk a little bit about my journey, like why I care about the issues that I care about, and then I'll probably go off on a couple of tangents about different things, as I always do, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about why I think that food is important in this conversation as well, and how it all ties together. So I went vegan 7 years ago, and it's kind of funny because when we talk about veganism, we often think of that moment where we went vegan. But what I think is interesting is to think about all those moments that led up to that point. Because the reason we care about animals isn't because we had this one moment where we realized, oh wait, animals matter. Throughout our whole life, we had these moments of realizations which led us to the point of going vegan. And so to give you a couple of examples for me, I remember being really, really young and eating this beef casserole, this cow casserole my mum had made. And I took a bite out of it, and I saw this vein in the chunk of cow flesh that I was eating. And I remember looking at it and feeling disgusted by it. And I never liked beef casserole ever again. And what's funny is I blamed the beef casserole for being disgusting without realizing that the reason I didn't like it was because I recognized I was eating someone else. But something must have switched in my head on that day because I could never look at beef casserole the same. But I, in my head, rationalized it in a way that it wasn't about the cows, it was just about the beef casserole. When I came to Barcelona in 2013, my goodness, so long ago, I went to the zoo. And in the zoo was this bear. And the bear's probably still there right now. And this bear was just sat down. And they looked the most bored I'd ever seen an animal in my life. They looked so fed up and so depressed. And I remember looking at this bear and thinking how horrible it is that we've kept this bear in this captivity, you know, in this place, this prison for them, where all they have are the four walls around them for their entire life. And I remember looking at the rest of the zoo and realizing, hang on a minute, this is an awful place. That was the last time I ever went to a zoo. But after I left the zoo, even though I felt so disgusted by this, I went and ate some dead chickens, right? And then the documentary Blackfish came out a little while afterwards, or around the same time. And I went to see Blackfish at the cinema. And I remember being shocked by how we were treating killer whales and cetaceans in captivity and thinking, wow, SeaWorld is the worst place ever. We need to shut SeaWorld down. And so then I went to a protest called Empty the Tanks in central London. And I had a banner that was saying that we should free the killer whales from captivity. And then after that protest, I went to Wagamama's and I ate more dead chickens. And I remember speaking to people at that protest who were vegan and thinking, that's a bit strange, isn't it? To be vegan, totally unironically, whilst holding a sign trying to defend animals. But all of these moments in our life lead up to the realization that we have. And so when I finally went vegetarian and then vegan afterwards, I reckon if it wasn't for all of these small little moments in my life, maybe those impactful moments that made me make those switches, maybe they wouldn't have actually impacted us in the way that they did. Now, the reason I say this is because it's hard speaking to people, isn't it? Oh, God. Aren't people the worst, right? Especially when it comes to veganism. I was saying I work with this guy called Hudson in America, and we were laughing to ourselves the other day because we were saying veganism is the only issue where it doesn't matter what political line you're on, you can all agree it's terrible. You can be a communist, you can be a fascist, you can be a centrist, you can be a liberal, you can be a conservative. One thing that everyone agrees on is that veganism is awful, and there are all these reasons why you shouldn't be vegan. It's the most unifying thing in the world, isn't it? The dislike is so annoying. So it doesn't matter who you speak to, they're always going to have an argument or something. And it's really hard because we have these conversations, don't we? And we think these people aren't listening to us, or we're not getting through to them, or they're just giving us these excuses all the time. Why am I even bothering? And the reason we bother, and the reason why we put ourselves in these uncomfortable situations where we talk to family members or friends, or go to activism events, or whatever it may be, the reason we do it is because we could be a part of that jigsaw of change. We might not be the moment where someone goes, you know what, I'm going to go vegan, but we might be the Blackfish moment, or we might be the beef casserole moment, right? Because each and every one of these moments is so important, and that's what helps me get up in the morning, right? Because it's hard to speak to someone and to hear them give you excuses, but if you recognize that you can be that little moment in their life, well, there's no knowing who they could end up being in the future. They could be vegan at the very least, or they could be someone who is passionate about it in the same way that we all are in this room as well. Okay. Now, I went vegetarian when I was 20 years old, 2014. And the reason I went vegetarian is because I came across this story. And the story was about a truck carrying around about 6,500 chickens. And the truck had crashed on the way to a slaughterhouse near the city of Manchester, which is, of course, in northern England. And I remember reading this story and feeling sorry for chickens. It sounded so strange to me at that time to feel sorry for chickens. Who feels sorry for a chicken, right? But there I was, feeling sorry for them. Now, the problem was in my fridge was leftover KFC, because before I was vegan, fried chicken was my favorite food. Steak was probably a close second, but fried chicken was my favorite food. And so in my fridge was the leftover body parts of some chickens who had been fried. And yet, I was feeling sorry reading this story about chickens. Now, this was a really important moment because I realized that chickens matter. They morally matter. Their experience matters. What they endure matters. Because the reason I was feeling sorry for them was because I was reading about them being mutilated or harmed, broken wings, broken bones. Some of them were running into oncoming traffic on the roads and being hit by cars. And so I recognized that these animals matter and their experiences matter. But at the same time, I didn't realize that dairy and eggs was a problem. So I went vegetarian. And then, about 8 months after being vegetarian, I went vegan. And the reason I went vegan is because of the documentary Earthlings. Now, it's quite funny, because when people find out my name's Earthling Ed, I think the first thing they think of is some extraterrestrial alien thing, right? And I'm like, it's got nothing to do with aliens, all right? But what it's got to do with is this documentary, because that was the catalyst for me to make that change to veganism. But more importantly than that, it wasn't just the documentary. Now, I at that time had a hamster called Rupert the Hamster. And who would have thought that this little 5-6-inch being would have such a huge impact on my life? I bought him for £10, so what's that, like 14 euros from a pet store. And I bought him thinking, he's cute, he'll be nice, this will be fun, we'll have a hamster. And yet this hamster, Rupert, taught me so much about myself and so much about how I view others in the world. He had no idea, right? He just ate broccoli all day and was happy about it. But he was changing my life in such an instrumental way. And so after the documentary had finished, Earthlings, I'm looking at Rupert the Hamster. And I'm thinking, wow, Rupert has such a personality. And so what I mean by that is he loved broccoli, like I just said, but he didn't like kale very much. I totally relate to that. Kale, broccoli though, growing, right? Also, Rupert was the laziest hamster you could ever meet. When I bought Rupert the hamster, I thought of Rupert running in this wheel. You know, when you think of hamsters, you think of them running in the hamster wheel, right? I never saw Rupert run in a hamster wheel. No, I saw him do it once, and he decided it wasn't for him. And I also relate to that because physical exercise is also not for me either, right? And so I'm looking at Rupert the hamster, and I'm thinking, wow, you lazy hamster. You don't do anything. That's weird. But at the same time, I recognized that that thing that he didn't do, which other hamsters do, made him unique. Meant that he had a personality, he had likes and dislikes, enjoyed certain things, didn't like other things. Wow. So there's things that made Rupert the hamster actually Rupert the hamster. If I'd bought another hamster from the store, he wouldn't be Rupert the hamster. He would be a different hamster. So he's different. He has these personality traits that make him unique. And then I thought about all the other animals, all the pigs, all the cows, all the dairy cows and egg-laying hens, because they're the ones I still exploited. I thought about all of them, and I realized, hang on a minute, they are the same. They're not the same. That's the whole point. They're different, they're unique, they are individuals. And to recognize that animals are individuals is an incredibly profound thing to do, because we don't think of them as being individuals. When we think of pigs, we think of pigs. When we think of chickens, we think of chickens. We don't think of a chicken or a pig. And when we recognize these animals are individuals with their own subjective experiences, and so what I mean by that is if we have 2 pigs here and I kick one pig, that one pig who's being kicked feels that on their own in the same way that we feel what we feel on our own. When they can feel these subjective experiences, it means that what we do to them as individuals is so important. And then I realized that what we do to animals is an issue of a mindset problem. People go, plant-based diet, food. But food is a symptom of the problem. The issue is that we view non-human animals with having such little worth that everything that we do to them for food becomes justified because we view them as having such little worth. Now, the reason that we can gas them or mutilate them or do the things we do is because we view their lives as being so insignificant, those things become allowed. But if we recognize that their lives have higher value than we currently assign to them, then all of those things that we do automatically become unjustified. Because how could you ever justify doing those things to an individual whose subjective experience matters? And that's why I went vegan. It's probably why so many of you went vegan, right? Because we recognize that there are issues in this world far greater than our inconvenience or our taste pleasure or our desire to continue living the way that we've always lived. We recognize that sometimes in life, doing what is right is not always the same as doing what is easy. And that's something we can use in many aspects of how we treat others, humans included within that as well, of course. And so then I decided that I needed to do something about it. The reason I decided that is because I was at university at the time. and I saw the documentary Cowspiracy. Now, at university, I had all of these environmental friends, you know, in the environment. No, I'm joking. They were environmental friends, right? And they did care about the climate. And so I thought, hang on a minute, I'm going to go into my university. It's a bit cheeky. I'm going to go into university, and I'm going to tell my friends about Cowspiracy. They're going to watch it, and then we're going to be one big vegan family, and it's going to be amazing, and we'll all dance together and, I don't know, do vegan things like eat quinoa and throw kale at one another, whatever it is, right? I was new to veganism. I didn't understand it. But I went into my university and I said, look, I've just seen this documentary called Cowspiracy. You should watch it. And this girl comes over to me and she says, Ed. Oh, I knew it wasn't going to be good when she said that. Ed. She says, it's great that you're vegan. And I thought, oh God, even worse. That's the worst thing, isn't it? When they go, I think it's brilliant that you're vegan, right? Fantastic. She goes, I think it's great that you're vegan and that you care. But you consume tofu and soy milk, right? And that's the leading cause of deforestation in the Amazon, soy farming. And I thought, is it? Could it really be that my consumption of soy milk, and look, I'm a self-professed soy boy. And there's some people use that as an argument against vegans, don't they? Oh, you're a soy boy. I go, yeah, and what of it? You know, let's do this thing, right? Soy's the best. It's fantastic. I love it, right? But anyway. So I'm thinking, is it true that my consumption of soy is destroying the rainforest? And I didn't know what to say to her. And she had this expression on her face. And it was the most annoying expression I've ever seen because it was just total smugness. You know, she looked so happy with herself. She walked off again thinking, ha, ha, ha. And I was so annoyed at myself. And I said, I never want to see that face again, you know? I don't want someone to say something to me and for me to not know what to say back to them. So I went home and I Googled, is soya farming bad for the Amazon rainforest, or bad for South America? And lo and behold, yes, it is. But lo and behold, not because of us, but because of all the animals who are fed, all of the feed, most of which, you know, comes from places like South America and such. So that was my response. And now I knew what to say. I should have gone marching back up to her, but I was a bit timid at that time, so I didn't speak to her again, I don't think. But I had this response, and I thought to myself, hang on a minute, what else is there to learn? And so I started digging in deeper and learning a little bit more and a little bit more. And the funniest thing is, the more I learned, the more I felt passionate to do something about it. And so that's when I decided to start a YouTube video. Now I should mention, I've used words like I a lot, but the only reason that I am vegan and the only reason I do what I do is because of my wife, who's not here, right? But without her, none of this would have happened, you know, and that's the powerful influence of a loved one, isn't it? You know, you're going to do it or else, and that kind of influence. No, God bless her, she's fantastic for it. But at the same time, I was like, I need to do something about this. And she said, well, why don't you start a YouTube channel? And I looked at her. No, are you mad? A YouTube channel? I'm not that kind of guy. And she was like, look, we should do it, because we both studied film at university. So it made sense. You know, we've got a camera, we know how to film, we know how to edit. It makes complete sense. We'll just do a YouTube channel. And I thought, that's easy for you to say, isn't it? You know, you're not the one in front of it. Anyway, she's very persuasive. So one day we do it. And I'm sitting on the sofa and we're about to film this video. And my hands are all clammy and sweaty, and I'm like just dripping. And I've not even started recording yet, you know, I'm just totally a nervous wreck. And so she hits record, and we start, and I'm like, hello, my name is Ed. I'm vegan, and I think you should be too, so please watch this video. We never uploaded it, just awful video. Sometimes I watch it to haunt myself. No, not really, but we kept persisting. And then I got a message from someone, and they said, we're going to go to Trafalgar Square, or Camden, I think it was, and have conversations with people about being vegan. And I thought, that sounds like the most terrifying thing you could possibly expect me to do. And then I thought, well, you know, I should do it, right? So I went along. And it turns out I had the most lovely conversation with this American couple, all about cancer and heart disease and processed meat and everything, awful like that. But it was great. And they were lovely. And I thought, hang on a minute, maybe people aren't as scary as we think that they are. Maybe there's something to this. Maybe the reason people don't think about this issue is because no one's ever asked them any questions about this issue. And then I thought about myself, and I thought about how I wish I'd been vegan my entire life. I mean, we all do, don't we? Most of us, I'm sure, at least. And then I thought to myself, well, hang on a minute, no one said anything to me. I met some vegans, but they never said anything to me. Maybe if they'd said something to me, I'd have changed sooner. And I thought, hang on a minute, maybe I have an obligation in a way to actually talk about these issues. Not just, of course, because the animals need us to do something, but also because maybe the reason why people haven't made these changes is because they've never had the chance to think about why they should make these changes. And so I went out again. And this time I met two very unfriendly South African guys. And they were telling me all about how they love to hunt. And I could feel myself getting pretty annoyed. And they said, look, the thing is, we do it humanely. And I said, okay, can you describe how you humanely take the life of someone else? And they said, well, you put some electricity through their head. And I said, well, how would you like it if your mum had electricity put through her head? And it turned out he didn't like it at all. No, he did not like it at all. He was not happy. And then I realized something after that exchange. I realized that the way we speak to people is not just a matter of what we say, it's also a matter of how we say it. Now, vegans have a terrible optics problem, right? And what I mean by that is the way that people view vegans is terrible. They think we're these preachy, militant, extreme. We are, aren't we? But it's our little secret that we are, isn't it? They think that we're these preachy, militant, extremist, we just eat kale every day and want to be miserable all the time. And the truth is, if we can speak to people in a way that doesn't meet their expectation of what we are, then we've already done one of the most important things that we can do. We've shown them that their impression of veganism is wrong. And so everyone who sits down with me now, who I speak to, I always take 2 minutes before we start rolling the cameras just to make conversation with them. How are you? What's your name? Where are you from? What do you study? Why do you study what you study? What was your inspiration? What do you want to do when you graduate? Do you prefer it here or where you're from? And the reason I do that is because people have this idea of what they think I'm going to be when they sit down. And if I cannot be what they think I'm going to be, then instantly they have an expectation that they can be wrong. And that's the most important thing we need to instill in someone, the belief that they can be wrong, doubt. Because doubt is what fuels us to critically analyze our actions. If we doubt ourselves, we then have the ability to change ourselves. But the problem is, so few of us actually think that we can be wrong. Humans have this fantastic ability of being so wrong, but believing that they're so right at the same time. We're all guilty of that in certain ways. And so by having these conversations, what I like about it is it gives me the ability to meet people where they're at. And the reason I tell you this is not to talk about that necessarily, but to hopefully bring in some sort of message of hope. And that message of hope is this: good people do bad things. That's what I've realized. When I sit down and I speak to people and they say the most outrageous things I've ever heard. I uploaded this video yesterday, right? It's the most outrageous thing I've ever heard in my life, all right? Well, not my life. It's the most outrageous thing I've heard against veganism. And it is so unbelievable. But this was like half an hour into our conversation. And I knew a little bit about him by this point. And when I heard him say what I said, I didn't hate him for saying it, because I recognized that he isn't a bad person for having the views in this particular situation that he has. This person is an inherently, hopefully, a good person that has been misguided through the way that culture and society have raised us, through the information that he receives when he turns on his TV or when he goes online or whatever it may be. And so what I love about these conversations is it's made me feel hopeful for what we can achieve as a species, because fundamentally we all align on the same basic ideas. That a world that reduces the harm we cause to others is a preferable world. And that's all it takes. If we recognize that reducing suffering to others is the right thing to do, that's all we have to recognize to understand why veganism is what we should pursue, why we should be vegan. And so I think that we're at a precipice right now of fundamental change. And the reason I say that is not just because of the growing awareness, but also because of food. I see what I do as kind of a two-pronged thing. I guess I see what I do as one part of that prong. And so veganism is a two-pronged thing. What I mean by that is we have to give people the why, but we also have to give people the how. Now, it's no good talking about all the reasons why we should do something if someone doesn't have the ability to then do that thing. And so food has to be an instrumental part of it, because without food, what is there? Just a a belief that can't be substantiated, a belief that can't be pursued. So we as, I guess, vegans have two things that we need to do. Teach people why they should be vegan. And then those of us who can produce delicious food, well, let's do it. Because the thing we need is more of it. And that's part of the reason why we're here tonight, obviously, to talk about this food space as well. And I've been lucky enough to dabble a little bit in the food space. It's funny, when I was younger, I wanted to be a chef. Okay. I went to Sorrento in the south of Italy and fell in love. I was like 12 years old. I fell in love a lot when I was 12 years old, right? And I fell in love with Sorrento. I thought it was the most beautiful place I'd ever been in my life. I wanted to drink limoncello every day and dance in the sunshine of Sorrento. But what I most importantly wanted to do is open up a restaurant there. And guess what? It was going to be called Ed's. Because apparently I was the most egotistical child you could possibly think of. Ed's, and everyone was going to come to Ed's, and no. But it was going to be a seafood restaurant. Funnily enough, that dream died. Thankfully, that dream died. But it's been wonderful to work in the food space because it's been great to realize just how much is done there, but also how important it is, and how amazing technology can be. And this is another thing that fills me with great hope. The way that we as a species can evolve is absolutely phenomenal. I mean, you think about what we are, and then you think about what we have achieved, and then what we could go on to achieve. Isn't that just the most exciting thing you could possibly think of? Veganism represents all that is wrong, or what we do to animals represents all that is wrong with humanity. Selfishness, arrogance, greed, self-determination, all of these things. But veganism represents all that's good about humanity, the acceptance of being wrong, the humility to change on behalf of others, a progression towards doing something better and differently, the acknowledgement that others matter, a selflessness that comes along with that, the, I guess, removal of your selfish convenience and desire and replacing that with the understanding that we should do something different for the benefit of someone who isn't us, me, I. And that's what I love about it. But more than that, the technological perspective that comes along with it, of what we can achieve, is so exciting. Think of what we can do by putting our brains together and creating a food system that's ethical and equitable, that's just and compassionate and comes from these values that we all have. Think of what we can achieve through coming together and recognizing that as individuals, we have the power to create great change. People say to me all the time, Ed, I'm just one person. What difference am I going to make? But the truth is, the only thing that's ever brought about actual change are individuals. Individuals coming together, forming collectives and changing societies and then changing mentalities. And so it's hard to think that we as individuals are going to change the world and make a difference. And as individuals, we're not. But as individuals unified under a greater understanding of what we can achieve, there's no knowing what we can do. We can do so much. And maybe that's how we end this. Rather sporadic and strange talk, right? I felt that it was important not just to come and tell you all the things that are bad, because we already know that. And I think it's important not just to hit home all the things that reinforce why we have made the decisions that we have made, because that can leave us feeling emotionally drained. I wanted to say something that hopefully inspired us to recognize that we actually are doing something that's firstly important, but secondly, as humans, there's something there that I think is really beautiful. And we are terribly, terribly flawed as a species. And there is so much that we do wrong. But if there's one thing that I'm trying to discover and learn as I do what I do, it's that actually there's something beautiful there that can come about as a consequence of hopefully what we can all be a part of. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it. But now to the main event, which is to bring in these fantastic voices who are experts on things that I know very, very little about, but I'm super excited to learn from them. So thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate it.
Hola. Hola. Hi, everyone. We're about to start the panel. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ed, for your talk. It was very inspiring. Well, first of all, I'm Júlia Castellano. I'm a researcher here at the Center of Animal Ethics at the UPF from the group Critical Communication. And today I will be moderating this panel about protect transition. So, in this panel we will have Daniela Waldhorn, social psychologist, board member of the Center of Animal Ethics here at the UPF. It was Marc, Bernat Añaños, co-founder and CEO of co-founder of Heura, co-founder of Heura, sorry, and Ed Winters, that we already know him, but vegan educator and entrepreneur, I would say. Thank you. Okay. So we're going to talk about the protect transition. I would like to start saying that from the talk that we just had, it seems like we have a problem, which is that we as humans need protein, and that we are using it, or we are taking this protein that we need from animals, which, as Ed has said, has a lot of bad impact in many issues like climate change, the North and South relations, but especially I would say that the most important or the worst fact of this is the one related to ethics. The fact that we cannot take animal protein in the same way that we take a fruit from a tree, and that using this animal protein always involves suffering for the other animals. But at the same time, we have this big problem, but it seems that we also have the solution, which is plant-based protein. And usually when you have the solution to a problem, you don't have a problem anymore. But it's not the case. So the first question that we wanted to make to all of you is, why is this happening? Which do you think are the main barriers for people not transitioning towards the plant-based diet? So you can talk maybe about your own personal barriers a little bit as Ed did, but you can also share from a professional point of view the barriers that you have identified and what are you doing to overcome them, or what do you think it should be done? So someone wants to start?
I can start.
Perfect.
Cool. Do I have to press something?
Yes, you have to press the button.
That's very heavy. Good. Can you listen well? Cool.
No?
No? Yes?
Yes,
Good.
and sorry, we would have like about 5 minutes per person because we have...
I'll go quicker, so
Okay,
we have
perfect.
more time to them ask. I think it's
Perfect.
more interesting.
Okay.
I think he just said it. It's information and then products that help these people that are being informed to have change. But sometimes, like, we make decisions, and I think if now we ask how many people did become vegan for the animals, most of the room will say for the animals and not for sustainability or health. But when you are in the business, you see that most of the people that are turning vegan or that are reducing the amount of meat, it's because of health. It's because of the impact that has on us. And so if we are pragmatic enough, we have to talk a lot more about how plant-based protein, how reducing the amount of meat intake is helping your health, because at the end, the objective is to have a vegan world. So honestly, like, the way will not be perfect. So we have to be pragmatic on how we get to that way in a quicker way. Because the protein transition, I think we all know that it's going to happen. Data says it, and that's why the meat companies are investing a lot of money on this. If not, they will not do it. But I think it's good news. I mean, we are in the right path, and it's on us to make sure that we accelerate it. And I think we have to look at data. And sometimes emotion moves us. I mean, if it would be me, our Instagram would be about the animals, and I would say, hey, I'm in this sanctuary, and this is happening, and I would talk animals, animals, animals. But if I would do this, maybe many people that many people would not know about Heura, many people would not share the Heura information, etc., etc. So I think it's important to make sure we know our why, but also like to know which is the data is transforming society. And there is a very important data as well, which moved Marc a lot at the beginning to make the company happen. It's that most of the people that decide to reduce the amount of meat and becoming vegan stop and come back to meat because of social issues, because the products are not cool, because the products are not in the places you go to with your friends, and so you want to have fun with your friends. So I go back to my past diet because I guess it's because the why was not strong enough, but also because I had a new barrier. And at the end, I mean, we have to be honest, and we have to look at this data that make changes. So being pragmatic, I think it is something that it is very important, and that's why sometimes at Heura, I mean, by vegans, and maybe some one of you, we receive some criticism, and I think it's great that people pushes us to be more vegan and to be more pushy in this, but sometimes it's because we look at data and we say, okay, if we talk about protein, we will transform 10% more people. So let's talk a lot about protein. Let's go to the point of sale and say, 19 grams of protein, come on, make the change, you're gonna be healthy. And it is like that, and this is our way of doing things. But I want to thank this room because I'm sure that many people here push us to be, and here we have part of the comms department that we listen a lot and we try to push this and like to kind of find a balance on our why and the reason why we exist, but also on what's making the change to people's lives, and then at the end reaching that vegan world we want.
Thank you very much, Bernat. Daniela, you want to go next?
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, I agree with you, Bernat, about that I think the protein transition is inevitable. But I also believe that we don't know much about how to make that happen in terms of accelerating this transition, because if we make things happen quicker, then probably we will be sparing more animal lives from suffering. And a lot has been said about that people's food choices are mostly driven by price, by taste, and convenience. So if we got plant-based options that meet this criteria, then people will shift from consuming animal-based products to these plant-based alternatives. But actually, recent data is showing us that that may not be necessarily the case, that if we just focus on data about how many plant-based products are being consumed by people, that does not necessarily equal the amount of animal-based products that people are stop consuming. I don't know if it's clear, but I mean, this is based on the assumption that if we stop, if people are buying plant-based proteins, they are substituting that animal products with these new alternatives. But we got data from around 2 years ago that that is not necessarily the case. So we may have some very good, positive data about the impact of plant-based alternatives, but this data may not match what is actually happened. That is, people may be still consuming plant-based proteins, but they may be already vegan or vegetarian, or it may also be that people are replacing their animal-based products, maybe some of them, for example, let's say beef, consuming some plant-based products, but also adding more chicken to their diets. If that's the case, we should pay a lot of attention to that, especially because of this discourse about the climate crisis and all the threats driven by climate change. We know that some animal-based products are environmentally friendlier than others, right? That's typically the case of chickens or animal products that comes from animals, from aquatic animals, like fish or shrimp. So we should pay a lot of attention to what extent people consuming more plant-based proteins, which is, of course, good news, but to what extent that is actually saving animals, sparing animal lives from lives full of suffering. And I will pay a closer attention. I would like to learn much more about possibilities of developing plant-based alternatives for those animal products that are likely to cause the greatest suffering. That is mostly eggs, chicken meat, and also all the protein that comes from aquatic animals. It's not, and when we say aquatic animals, it's not only fish. Typically, we think of fish first, but actually the most exploited animals on Earth are shrimp. We do not have much evidence about whether they are sentient or not. It looks like they may be. But we should take this data into consideration, which animal products are causing the greatest suffering, and see how plant-based alternatives could contribute to reduce that suffering and accelerate the protein transition.
Thank you very much. Do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot really to add. I mean, I think what's just been said is very important when it comes to deciding how we talk about these issues, what our focus should be. I guess I've had a little bit of a change of heart, I suppose, in maybe the past 6 months or so. I've spent so much of my time talking about the environment. I was making so many videos talking about the environment, and I just started to get really fed up with it because I realized that I'm like, what am I talking about here, you know? Let's say that, you know, seaweed reduces the amount of methane that cattle produce by 80% or whatever. Who cares, you know? Like, methane's an issue, but I've started to become worried that by focusing too much of my time on things like that, I overlook the most important part of it. So it's, you know, corporate, from like a business perspective, you need to meet the market and you need to meet people where they are and present messaging that encourages people to buy those products. And so maybe some of the messaging that I use when I speak about these issues probably wouldn't work so well in a packet of delicious plant-based burgers. You know, I'm not sure if people would pick them up. But I think at the same time, when we speak about these issues, I guess encouraging that transition is about trying to, I guess, push the conversation in a way that's going to create the most resolute change. And so, yeah, not focusing too much on the environmental impact of beef production, but recognizing that that can drive people to consuming more chickens and more marine animals, and the suffering there is far higher in terms of volume and also in terms of what they endure. You know, chicken farming is just awful. So being aware of that, I think, is important, and recognizing that how we convey the message will be important. I sometimes look at the veganuary stats, and one thing I've always found quite interesting is that every year, relatively consistently, the majority of people who make the change do it because of animals. And I don't think they've got the data for this year, but last year in 2021, the same number of people did veganuary for animals as they did for the environment and health combined. So it was like 50% animals, 30-20, something like that anyway, there or thereabouts. And I thought that was really interesting, because often we think that animals are like the hard thing to speak to people about. Or don't mention animals because people will get funny about it. And that definitely happens. But I think when people connect with that side of it, the connection can be stronger than it would be for like health or environment, because you can always cheat on a diet, can't you? And if you've gone plant-based for health, it's always easy to find a reason to skip a day, and that doesn't change the fact that what they're doing is helping. It's just more of, I think, when I advocate, I like the idea of trying to advocate on something that I think creates stickiness in people's decision making. So it's hard because you need every form of conversation for every possible avenue, and some people resonate with things different to others. And speaking about the environment is so important, and speaking about health is so important, because the lives and health of humans also matter as well, and it's important that we make people conscious of how they can add longevity to their own life by also making changes that also help animals. I mean, isn't that just an amazing thing? There's no compromise on flavor. It's better for the environment, will make you live longer, hopefully, and reduces suffering. So yeah, it's hard, but I think a combination of all of these things will drive change. But an awareness of how certain forms of communication can maybe have unintended consequences that we don't necessarily want is so important. I think that's really great what you've mentioned, yeah.
Someone want to reply at something?
I mean, it could be an hour.
Yes, yes. I think that overall, Bernat first talked about how, especially I guess when you're in a business, you try to match the values and interests of your audience, and you said that you try to be very pragmatic. So, yes.
And let's remember, our audience is not this audience. You already made the change. The audience we try to achieve is the audience that they say, I will never stop eating meat. So we have to be pragmatic in this way. Because, I mean, we are already having the impact we want to see in the world.
Exactly,
Because
yes.
sometimes it isn't clear. My friends say, why do you talk like that? And it's like, I want to get you that you're not vegan.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. No, it
I don't want
makes
to turn
it makes a
myself
lot.
vegan again.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense. Daniela add that maybe by doing this there are some risks because it may seem that this is the fastest way to get people, but they may not then change the consumption of these products for vegan products. They can continue eating other animal products or even increase it in order to be.
Yeah, I mean that if we only see the data of plant-based product consumption, it may give us some very optimistic landscape of the change. I do believe that plant-based alternatives are needed for this transition and also for end animal exploitation. But we must be aware that people do not automatically replace one portion of an animal meat with one portion of plant-based meat. And there may be other spillovers that we are not aware of. And I wish we could have a better understanding of those dynamics.
Yes.
I just want to add something. I think sometimes it's relevant to put things in data. At Heura, sometimes like people come and say, hey, everyone eats Heura, blah, blah. And then we buy data on Kantar, which is this company that gives data about how the products sell in supermarkets. And we just got in 3% of the households in Spain. 3%, which means very few. And in the people that eat meat, just 9% of the people in Spain knows us. That doesn't mean that buys us, knows us. And in the vegan and vegetarian community, 39% of the people knows us if we listen to Kantar. So we are very, very far. And I think it's very important to kind of put data on the table because sometimes we are very optimistic. Yay, Heura or whatever company grows 400%. Yeah, I mean, you grow 400% from 100, so now you're 400. Mm-hmm. Clap, clap, clap to you. But the meat companies, they are also growing or maybe decreasing 1%. So we have to put things, I'm optimistic, I'm an optimistic. But we are very far, we're still very far, even though if it looks all shiny.
Yeah, that's some data, very short, about Impossible Burger that was introduced and other impossible options in a university in the United States. And they sold, I don't remember the timeline, but I don't remember, but they sold 16,000 plant-based meals. One would expect that then 16,000 meals with animal products were avoided, replaced by these plant-based options. But no, only 5,000 meals containing animal products were, that was the difference, not 6,000. The difference was just 5,000 meals containing animal products. So that is data that shows us that this replacement of animal products with plant-based meal is not always equal. So yeah, we need to better understand how to accelerate this transition.
And following this topic, the second question is pretty related. It's about the increase of vegan options on the market. I think that we could all agree that having new vegan brands, it's good news, also having new vegan restaurants. But what must maybe more controversial is the rise of vegan options from non-vegan companies. So we may have big fast food companies that their main income comes from animal products, and now they have a vegan burger. And I think that it can be controversial, and maybe some vegan or activists actually don't know what's the best strategy. Should I buy it because with my money I'm saying, okay, keep doing this, or should I not give money to this type of company? So I wanted to know, well, we wanted to know your opinion about this. Maybe also as a business, if you collaborate with other companies that are not vegan, why you do it, or yes, if you plan to do it in the future. So, do you want to start that, maybe?
Yeah, I'm happy to start. Look, we live in an imperfect world, and living in an imperfect world means not everything's going to fit nicely into how we want things to fit. You know, morally, the world is not so clear cut. It's pretty grey, isn't it? So do we want there to be McDonald's? No, we want McDonald's to cease existing from this moment on. Is that going to happen? No. So what's the best alternative? That's vegan options in McDonald's. Because on the one hand, we're told that veganism is inconvenient and inaccessible and it's not affordable. So if that's the arguments that people use, and also not tasty, so those are the arguments people use, well, the antidote to that is to make tasty plant-based food that's accessible and affordable. And so the way that we do that is by literally putting it in the places with the price points that people are used to right now. So I don't really see an alternative to this. Is it great? No, not really, but it's the best choice that we have right now. And sometimes people say, look, well, you know, if I buy the McDonald's burger or whatever it might be, I'm giving money to McDonald's and I'm funding what they do. And that's not strictly true. I mean, you are giving money to McDonald's, but you're giving them money to make them keep doing the thing that you paid for. So, for example, I have a restaurant in London called Unity Diner, and our best seller there is toe, fish, and chips. And because that's where the majority of the money in the diner is spent, apart from on drinks, you know, classic London, right? Apart from on drinks, it's on the toe, fish, and chips. So the amount of money that we spend on food, we spend more on that because more is being bought there. So basically the money that's spent on toe, fish and chips is going back into buying more toe, fish and chips. So if you go into McDonald's and you buy a McPlant, you're paying for more McPlants to be created, and you're also signaling to McDonald's that you want them to keep doing that. So it's not ideal. It isn't, but what's the alternative? To only have vegan businesses serving vegan foods? How does that help? I don't think it does. We need a mixture of both. And look, this may be slightly idealistic, but my hope is that in the future, when we've got pretty much a vegan world, whatever that might look like, you know, as much as is possible, and we've got all these vegan businesses, and then we've got McDonald's and they're now vegan, and KFC and they're now vegan, we can all go, oh, actually, to hell with you. See you later. We're not going to support you anymore. But I think that we have to get to that point before we can start, you know, to make those ethical choices in a way that is a little bit more morally clear. But for the time being, I think we just do the best we can, and that means making veganism as accessible as is possible, and that means working with the enemy a little bit.
Thank you.
Yeah, it is tricky because there are some companies in particular that I think they represent maybe all that's wrong about modern day capitalism, like it's the case of McDonald's. We can have very well-founded reasons why we don't want to give our money to these companies. And I can agree with those. I don't aim to now delving into those reasons or motivations, but I'm aware that several advocates who care not only about animal welfare may do have other criticism against some of these companies. And it's good to be aware of that. And if we have other concerns and concerns about social justice, this can also inform our decisions. But putting that on the standby for a while, if one of these companies offers a plant-based option, I think it's better than offering none. So I would call this as an improvement. An improvement doesn't mean that now they are doing things in the right way. I would call this as an improvement in the sense that it's better that they're offering one vegan option instead of offering none, under the assumption that this would contribute to make veganism more mainstream, that these companies have the resources to put their products on sale basically everywhere where they are. And this could also engage others who are not vegan or vegetarian to try tasty, good plant-based options. And I would say that this is an improvement under the assumption also that these plant-based alternatives would spare some animals from lives of suffering. And I insist that I call it an improvement, but it's not enough for these companies getting rid of all their responsibilities that they do have around other issues besides animal welfare. And if this actually helped to promote veganism, to create an environment where eating plant-based options is not something socially punished, as Bernat was describing before, this may help for pushing for this protein transition. Although I would be careful in some cases in which this option could actually lead to major profits of some companies that basically exclusively depends on animal exploitation. But I think that is something that we should be considered on a case-by-case basis. And I think there's another criticism here that has to do with that these companies are non-vegan, and so their motivation is not ethical. They do not care about animal welfare because they are still selling animal-based products, right? And they're doing just because they want to make money. And that is something that is not surprising. These are companies. They are for-profit entities. But I think many advocates are concerned about people doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons, right? We want people to consume plant-based products, but because they care for animal welfare or animal rights, not because of other reasons that may not be ethical as caring for the rights of animals. But we should accept that in several cases, institutions make decisions not because that is the right thing to do. Typically, the right thing to do, this argument comes later when one needs to rationalize why one decision was made. And we also gotta keep in mind whether this matters for animals. Like animals that are suffering in farms, do they care about whether the motivations behind this decision, assuming that these options would save some animals from lives of suffering? Animals probably wouldn't matter, wouldn't care. But we also must be aware that this is not enough for creating a world where animals matter. I do believe that this is an improvement in terms of helping people make more decisions that are more aligned with the world that we want to see. But of course, it is not enough. I think in order to overcome speciesism, we need to go way beyond that. But this is, I think, probably a necessary step. And probably big companies like McDonald's or Burger King are still gonna exist. And if that's the case, we may need to collaborate in some circumstances while we are creating and gaining enough social support for pushing for more ambitious changes for animals.
Thank you.
Almost everything has been said, but I think sometimes, like, do I think it's good news? Personally speaking, I think it's good news. Do I have to go to these places? No. I mean, it's not for me. I wasn't going. I can still not go. And there will be people that go there. And if they like it, they will keep buying it. That's number one. And sometimes, like, metaphor, for example, sometimes I listen to politicians that I would not expect, like, being pro-LGBTQ plus rights. And I listen to them and I say, wow, that's a big step. I mean, I would not expect this politician saying this. Would I vote for him? No. Am I happy that he is saying that? Yes, I think it's a step. So I think it's like that. It is imperfect, like the world, but it's not just the protein transition. It's in general. We have so many challenges to face. And something that you said that I had in my head is like, animals don't care how we get there. They want to get, like, they want us to get faster into that. And if having big companies that we dislike to sell these products, hey ho, hopefully we get 10 years before that expected. I think it's big news. And in Heura we have a motto that it's without options there is no freedom, and we have to be everywhere. And meaning everywhere, it means everywhere. Everywhere you go, you have to have an option that you want to share with your people, not just for you, but you want to share it because this is the filter that people need. And like 3 years ago, very yellow big chain here in Spain trusted us, where in a point, like, none of the big companies were trusting us. All the messages we were receiving back were, you're crazy, this in Spain is going to work. It's too early. Maybe in 10 years you come back to me. And that team was not vegan. It was not a vegan team, but they trust. They say, hey, these two guys, they come here. The product is cool. They say, there is people that wants this. Okay, let's look at data. Yeah, it's starting, very small percentage, but let's be the leaders. What happened? This very yellow company was the first one, but then pushed so many others to have options. And now when we go to if we go to these big chains, they are not as big as the ones we mentioned, like Burger King or McDonald's, then you have options. And when you go to an airport, you have an option. Before you hadn't, et cetera. And I think it is imperfect. Yes, I would love to give the money to my grandma all the time and like she cooking for me all the time, everywhere in the world. But it is not like that. We have to make sure we use the resources we have today to make the biggest, to make the biggest impact. So yeah, I think you said the rest.
I sometimes think about myself when I was 18. I used to go out. I was born in a city called York, and my friends and I, we had this just this routine. We'd go out for the day, and then we'd always go to McDonald's, and I'd always get a Big Mac and chips because I had a voucher. I don't know how I ended up with a voucher, but it was like a permanent Big Mac and chips. It was great at the time. Obviously terrible, but I used to always go there with my friends, and I think about myself as an 18-year-old wanting to make that change, but having the same friendship group that I used to have, and then having to explain to them that we're not going to go to McDonald's anymore like we do every weekend when we go into the city and we have a couple of drinks and we go to McDonald's. I was thinking about myself in that position and how awkward I would feel and how hard it would be and how easy it would be for me to just go and get a Big Mac like I always did and to not want to say anything. And I think about how grateful I would have been if I was 18 making that change and still been able to go to McDonald's and still have a vegan burger and celebrate that friendship that I had in the way that we always did with the traditions and routines that we had. And so I think about all of the young people who would like to have an easier transition made for them and how significant and meaningful something like that could be in terms of making sure they don't lose friends or have awkward interactions or whatever it might be. So I think that there is the very good argument that for those of us who are vegans, who have vegan friends and stuff, it's very easy why if you have the choice between supporting a vegan business or going to McDonald's, going to the vegan business makes sense, and you probably should do that. But I also think it's important to have those options so that the people who don't have vegan friends or who are maybe not into veganism in the same way that we are yet have that option when they go into Pans, right? You're in Pans, right?
That's the very yellow one.
Wow, I had that sandwich like 2 days ago. It was so good. Like the guacamole one, that was awesome. So thanks for that. But those are the moments that I think are really important, and to have those options. And also it normalizes that word. If you go into Burger King and you see the word vegan, that normalizes it to everyone who goes into Burger King. It's no longer weird because Burger King is selling vegan burgers. It's no longer weird because Pan has Heura. All these things are no longer weird because we have to normalize being vegan. And the best way one of the best ways that we can normalize it is by making it seem like it's just the same as everything else. It simply is. It's not fringe, it's not strange. You don't have to be counterculture to be vegan. You can be the same person you've always been and eat in the same places you always have and also be vegan. And I think that normalization is also really important as well.
Thank you very much for your answers. Very interesting.
And I want to share something which is, I think, very optimistic as well. We're in another yellow business. I don't want to give names but anyway, in very few months, the menu was all animal-based. We got in, and now 10% of the revenue, and it's getting space from the revenue that was coming from animal products, is Heura's. 10%. It's a lot for a business that 6 months ago they didn't have anything. So, and I don't think the customers changed a lot. It's the kind of same customers, but they tried something that they liked, and it is something that I did not mention before, and we have some homework there. We have to get cheaper. It is at the same price than the animal products, so you don't have an extra barrier. And I think with this data, we just have to be in more places. The same price or cheaper, hopefully cheaper in the future. More places, and not just big cities. I come from a very small village in Girona, and when I go to my village, I cannot even buy tofu yet. Not tofu. I mean, they had Garden Gourmet, one product, but no one was buying it. So not even Garden Gourmet survived, which comes from Nestle, imagine. So there is still a lot of work. We here in Barcelona, we are in this bubble of restaurants and like amazing stuff and vegan stores and stuff, but there is a lot to do without options there is no freedom, and this as a mantra, and putting options in every single space. And then as vegans or individuals, supporting those we care or we want to support us with our money.
Thank you. The last question, it can be answered, I think, very quickly. It's an important question. It's about intersectionality. We all know that animal oppression is related to other kinds of human oppressions. We can think about climate change and how it doesn't impact. It doesn't have the same impact depending on where you live. We can think about gender equality, or in the case that we were talking now about a class conflict because of the prices of vegan products. So we would like you to share one good practice, something that you do to address these other oppressions and these other forms of activisms. It can be in your personal life or through your business.
Well, I think the thing about intersectionality is the very meaning of it is that things intersect, right? And so by speaking about the issues that we speak on behalf of, hopefully the intention behind that is also to tackle the other things that exist that are problems in the world. And so I often use words like equitable when I talk about food systems. And the reason I use words like that is to say that the purpose of this transition in food isn't just to get animals out of the food system, but it's also to create systems of food production that bring down the cost for consumers. That means that public money, so our tax money, is being spent more fairly and can be spent on social issues like the housing crisis that exists in the UK, probably here as well. And so the knock-on effect of changing something like our food system is profound, because it can create, hopefully, and it should create a fairer world for humans as well, fairer societies for humans as well. So that's why I like to use words like that. It's to emphasize that this isn't just merely a quest to remove animals. It's a far bigger quest, which has not just an emotional backing behind it in terms of like trying to reduce animal suffering, but has this very economical, logical, data-driven support behind it as well. Yes, we want to reduce animal suffering, but we also want to produce food at a better cost that's more sustainable, so has less environmental damage, which is better for local communities as well as global communities, and fundamentally puts healthy food on the plates of people who need that healthy food. There's a reason why we have an animal agriculture system alongside a health crisis across the world. The two are completely interlinked. There's a reason why we have poor funding for social housing and for social crises, whilst having billions of euros and pounds and dollars at our disposal to give to animal farmers whenever they ask for it. And that's because we have a corrupt system that doesn't take into account animals or humans fundamentally. And so the quest for veganism is not simply a quest to eliminate animal harm, it's a quest for a better world. And that includes us, humans, how we relate to each other, how we interact with each other, how we communicate with one another. All of these things come under the scope of trying to create a vegan world, because a vegan world is one that reduces harm and suffering wherever it's possible and practicable. And we fall under that scope as well, thankfully. And one of the reasons I like having conversations, and one of the reasons why I like to upload the conversations in the format I do, is because I think it's important to have healthy dialogue. Now, we've become so used to, I say we, for those who absorb kind of YouTube content, we've become so used to this rhetoric, or this communication of people destroying people, or people wrecking people, or people owning people, and that creates so much division and hostility because we no longer listen to one another. And I think the breakdown, or I think there can be a significant breakdown that emerges when we no longer view each other as other people, but as caricatures of what we think those people represent. What I mean by that is, I've been to Texas a couple of times more. Growing up, right, I said Texas is one of those places I will never go to. I've been there so many times now, I know it too well. Anyway, there's some lovely people in Texas, but there's also some not so lovely people in Texas. And one of the things that I think I enjoy about going to places like Texas is it's so different to everything that I'm used to. And so many people there represent everything that I don't like about the world, and about America especially. Well, there's a lot not to like about that place, isn't there? But anyway. We're not perfect either, right? But I think having those kind of conversations, I think what I like about it is it shows that there is the possibility for humans to also interact in a way that is amicable and can create positive change. Because one of the things that I've always tried to teach myself, and it's what I said in the talk, is that good people can do bad things. And we have to bring out the good in people. This is a bit of a tangent, but fundamentally, veganism is great for everyone. And I think as well as being vegan, we have to have an awareness of how we can influence people in other ways to also recognize the human atrocities that currently still exist. And to recognize that, yes, they are interlinked and there is that intersection, but also that oppression and atrocities can exist as things within their own rights. And it's important that we recognize that the harm that we commit to others is harm that we commit to others, and isn't necessarily an abstract concept in that sense. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, thank you. Daniela?
Well, I've got a question, but how do you account for that in your activism? You were saying that that how veganism intersects with other issues, but I wanted to ask you if you got, for example, a more specific situation or example of your activism in which you can describe how you account for the intersection of veganism and other forms of oppression?
Well, kind of what I was saying at the beginning, by discussing these terms as or discussing these concepts as concepts that don't just help animals. So obviously when I'm talking about animal ethics, I'm talking about animal ethics. And so that directly relates to animals, because it's also important that animals are given space in intersectionality to be recognized as oppressed beings, outside of how their oppression also oppresses us humans. But in terms of the environment and health, I mean, these are directly human curses. I mean, the environment will affect everyone, animals included. But when we speak about the environment, we always tend to take a human-centric approach to that. The displacement of indigenous people for soybean production in the rainforests of South America is a good example. And so, I mean, and then look, in situations such as the storming of the Capitol that occurred in Washington, that was something that I shared as a thing within itself. And that's what I was saying before about recognizing things that happen as things within themselves. And so when that happened, and obviously the far right stormed the Capitol building and challenged democracy as we know it in America, that was something that I shared as a thing within its own because of what it represented to the minorities in America and to people within America in general. But then in terms of an intersectional thing, it's about recognizing how these approaches do intersect and using phrases and words that recognize that. And when we talk about veganism, I'm always very aware that when we talk about vegan worlds, that's not really that's not something that really can exist, or at least especially not at the moment, because there isn't a food system that's equal for everyone. And because people live in areas of the world where they don't have a Pans, for example, or a Tesco like I have in the UK, people live in different environments to us, and therefore the morality of veganism changes based on your environment. So recognizing that there are nuances to different people's situations, and someone who lives in the Arctic Circle shouldn't be held to the same moral standards as someone who lives in Barcelona. Things like that I think are important.
Where you want to go? You decide.
Well, if we are talking about this issue, I think it would be best men not being the first talking.
Good. I accept it.
Yeah, I'm very glad that Júlia, you raised this question, because I think it's an important issue, recognizing how speciesism is intertwined with other forms of oppression. I do believe that in several cases, most advocates are aware of this intersection, at least intellectually or rationally. But this issue, I believe, it's not a matter of discourse or what do I say or not tell people when I'm leafletting. I think it's important to put this into practice in terms of who is gaining visibility in our efforts to defend animals, whether we are giving credit to people who are working on this issue and recognize their contributions to their work, or to what extent we, for example, make comparisons between speciesism and human slavery that can actually be very detrimental and offensive to millions of people who suffered the injustices of human slavery in the past. And I do believe that this issue merits a lot of much more reflection, especially given that we are now in a wealthy, educated, democratic country, industrialized country, which entails a lot of privilege. And in this regard, I think we need to do much better, and not only when it comes to the content of what we say or what we don't. And I do believe that veganism per se in itself, it's not necessarily beneficial. White veganism can be very harmful to underprivileged communities or people from the global majority, and we need to account for that and be very careful. And I also believe that other issues do entail an emotional burden that could be even higher and more intense than speciesism, and that's a point where I disagree with you at. And I say that because I believe that's the case for several people and advocates from the global south who are trying to overcome several barriers, overcome other sort of injustices in order to defend animals. And I think that we need to be aware of our own privileges when doing activism for animals, and see if there are ways in which we can do better. For example, when communicating, as the example that I gave before, or if I got free time, like in my case, if I got free time for doing some advocacy, I prefer to help animal groups who are in a no-wealthy country, not in an enriched society, who may lack of the resources that I do have at the moment, I do believe that I could have a greatest impact for animals there, but I would also be accounting for my own privileges of living in an European, stable, democratic, rich country like Spain. This is just something that I do, or a rule that I got for myself. If I do pro bono work, it's gonna be for others, the other advocates in in a less privileged situation than mine, but that's just an idea that I'm sharing with you. I also I think it could be useful, something that we have been doing with other advocates, arranging some meetings to discuss how speciesism intersects with other forms of oppression in our own activities, and see if we can reflect together and find ways in which we can overcome those sort of discriminations together. Because typically it is said that, hey, you need to self-care, take your time that you need, and rest. And assuming that the problem is of an individual that is not taking good enough care of themselves, and they may be burned out, but actually discrimination because of being a racialized person, because of your gender expression, and because of several irrelevant characteristics is not something that is just an individual phenomenon. It's an structural phenomenon, like speciesism. So we do not need to just fix individuals. We need to work collectively to overcome these other forms of oppression, of which the animal rights movement is not accepted of.
Thank you.
Cool. I think there is something here that we don't mention a lot. I think just by the fact of pushing the protein transition, we are definitely having a good impact in many things. And sometimes we talk a lot about the South. But I remember at the very beginning of the pandemic, when we were all sent home, most of the only people that had the chance in one area in Catalonia, which is called Vic, to go out and work, were people called illegal by the system, and they had to go and work for the meat industry so we could eat at home. And this was not the South. This is here big, in a very wealthy area of Catalonia. And I think sometimes we have much closer effects here at home. Obviously, and then in the South, it's larger as an impact, but it's sometimes when I talk to my friends that are vegan and I talk to more relatable things, they have easier switches. They say oh wow, this is happening here. With my friends from Vic, I told this to them, and I have one vegetarian there now. It's a step, huh? And it happened because of that article of what's happening next to my home and what's the effect of my fridge in that. Second thing that I think is important as a business, we have a lot of work on intersectionality, definitely. I mean, we are in a biased society with a lot of work. We have a rapid growth, and this means that we are imperfect in many things. However, do we ask ourselves how to get better? Yes, constantly. How we work constantly to get less biases? Yes. We get biases, for sure, I'm sure. Now if we do an audit from the top, we will see biases. Yes, it is real. But I think what we have to have here is growth mindset on, okay, how we destructure everything that we have structured in our heads, and not my head, but now 140 people that push this from Heura. And yeah, keep working. And sometimes I feel nonconformist, and I think 99% or 100% of this room is a nonconformist. Sometimes we point a lot what we miss on what the one next to misses, whoever is next to me. And sometimes we have to say, hey, how can I help you? Okay, you had a bias. To my team, I always tell them hey, if I make a comment that can sound that I have a racist bias, please tell me, because I might not know. I need you to tell me, hey, this has a bias. Did you know that this comes from this root? And I say, oh, wow. I'll stop doing or saying this. But sometimes I think we have to, and this sounds like very Pocahontas now, but hug us a bit more. Yeah, that's a racist thing. But I love Pocahontas. I think I became gay through Pocahontas. I loved John when I was a kid, so that's a factor. I think it was my first crush. But very happy, let's say, of saying, hey, let's hug each other a bit more and let's point each other a bit less. But I think this is what we try to do inside the team, because one thing that it is real at Heura, we are, I mean, the ones that are here, they are all vegan today, but we are not all vegan. We have huge diversity. And like helping each other, it's allowing people that now he left, but he was there and he is a person that I would not believe that he would come here. And he came, one person of the team, and because he told me, like, I think I have to become vegan. And I saw that you were doing this talk and I wanted to come. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I think it is something I have to hug him and not saying, hey, why are you not vegan yet? You know? And yeah. I mean, we have a lot of homework as Heura, as society, as an individual, because yeah, you just point me as a racist comment. I'll stop using Pocahontas as an example.
Okay, thank you very much for your answers. Now it's time for the public if they want to ask something. We will have 15 minutes, so I don't know how many questions depending on your answers, but if you try to keep it short, they can ask more. So do we use this?
It's off, just so you know.
You are the one. This one?
Yes, okay.
Hi, first of all, thank you so much. I have a quick question for you, Ed, if you don't mind. You said like we don't live in a perfect world, but I want to ask, don't you think that vegan options in McDonald's is a little bit like vegan military boots? I mean, where you draw the line, where you say, here no. Thank you.
I mean, we should have vegan military boots, right? I don't believe that we should have military, but I mean, obviously in the world that we have, that's a reality. So if people are in the military, they should have vegan military boots. The point is, I guess what I was saying about living in an imperfect world is, it's easy to think what we would love to have in a perfect world. In a perfect world, there'll be no need for vegan military boots because there'll be no militaries, because there'll be no wars, because there'll be no discrimination and racism and whatever is fueling the wars that we have. In a perfect world, there'll be no McDonald's or KFC, or they'd have been vegan from the beginning because we would have always have been vegan from the beginning. But that's not the world we're in, and so we have to do what's best with the hand of cards that we've been dealt. And with the cards that we've been dealt, we're living in a terribly imperfect world filled with many injustices and many problems. And so we have to make incremental changes wherever it's possible. I mean, Bernard used the word pragmatic earlier, and pragmatism is always fueling so many things that we make decisions on every single day, often unconsciously, of course. And so if we live in an imperfect world, it's how do we nudge it closer to being better in the quickest amount of time possible. Now, if we as vegans don't go to McDonald's, McDonald's isn't going anywhere. You know, if we as vegans, or if people who aren't vegan see that there's a vegan burger in McDonald's, because vegans who maybe aren't necessarily as passionate as we are about veganism, but are vegan for maybe the reasons that we are vegan, or maybe for more environmental or health reasons. I don't know how many health vegans are going to McDonald's in the first place, I'm not sure. But if there's those burgers there, then that's better than them not being there, which is what the point that we were discussing earlier. So with the world that we have now, would we rather that McDonald's had vegan burgers or didn't? Because those are the only two choices we have. And to me, it seems obvious that I'd rather they did. But that doesn't mean that, but if people don't want to support it, there's so many reasons why you shouldn't support it. I would never say that as a vegan, you have to buy the McDonald's vegan burger. Some people, I think, do sometimes make that claim. I'd never say that you have to. And one of the points I was making earlier is that as vegans who are so passionately in veganism that there's no there's no risk from us, right? If we have the option of supporting a vegan business or a non-vegan business that has vegan options, I think for us, supporting the vegan business makes a lot of sense because we want to put our money into the vegan economy in that sense. But that doesn't mean that it's not important that there's not vegan options in places like McDonald's, because for those of us who maybe have non-vegan friends or who have just started out on our journey or who are in an area of the world where there aren't that many vegan restaurants, but there are vegan McDonald's, let's say, as an example, it forms a very important, it represents something very important. And like I said before, that normalization of the word is really important, because when people think of vegans, or at least historically, they've thought of us as being something that's different, something that's unusual, something that you wouldn't want to be. But if you can go into a McDonald's or any restaurant or any fast food chain or whatever it may be, and see the word vegan and see vegan products, that is sending signals to you that it's not weird or different. There's nothing strange about it, because you can buy vegan food everywhere. You don't have to be someone that goes out of your way to be vegan. You can literally just walk into your closest food establishment and get something that's vegan. And I think it's sending subliminal messages, unconscious messages, that the way that we viewed veganism historically is not as it is now. But look, I think in the future, and this is something I maybe didn't express so well earlier, in the future, I would like to get to the point where we stop McDonald's from existing and stop KFC from existing. I'd love that to be the case. But that's not the situation now. That's a situation that can occur when enough people are vegan, hopefully as many as is possible, and then we can start choosing what companies we want to support. And so if everything outside is vegan, I'm not going to go to McDonald's. I'm not going to go to KFC, and we can hopefully encourage other people to do so because of the crimes against humans and animals that they are committing. So that's kind of what I would say. It's an imperfect world, but we have to do the best we can, and sometimes doing the best isn't always what is ideal, I guess. But if that helps animals in the short term in the most significant way possible, then it's a step in the right direction at least. But it's not perfect. Far from it.
Thank you. Can you pass the mic behind you, to the girl behind?
Hello, thank you for being here today. Well, my question is for Bernat. Okay, I'm an advertising and PR student from here, Pompeo, and I'm currently doing my final thesis on feminism patterns in vegan food brands. So I'm studying how some vegan brands, such as Heura among others, how these vegan brands are involved into other social movements that are against the oppression of some groups. In my investigation, I identify how in your communication, social media, websites, and everything, you talk and you are like positioned in some social issues. And I had the pleasure to interview to Angela a few weeks ago, and well, she explained me your values, your purpose as a brand, and among other interesting things. And knowing that, and from a kind of critical point of view, I think that you're doing like a really good job, like including inclusive language or positioning into some social issues. So my question, well, I would like to know, how does Heura approach or understand oppression of women in society? And why do you think it's important to have as a vegan brand to talk about these social topics or support other social movements such as feminism?
Thank you for the question. I would not do it but here we have two women from the comms team to answer, because it's mostly white men. I'm gay. It's the only thing I tick, but mostly white men sees like answering questions regarding how we have to work towards a world with less discrimination on women. Again, we are imperfect. We are learning a lot. We are much better than the beginning. We have to create spaces, and here I'm gonna get a bit broader, because a lot of times we just push, or like we see companies, and even at Heura at some point I think we said, we are so inclusive, we have a lot of women, and I think inclusivity and diversity is such a broad aspect. And someone one day told me, have you thought about introverts? And I was like, wow, I haven't thought about introverts. It's true, our meetings are not ready for an introvert. An introvert cannot add value in the company because we are very creative and we are like yelling and do things, and an introvert might not have the space. So at the end, for me, it's how we create, and at the end, what's the impact that Heura can have? We are 140 people. We have a like small impact still in what we do, but it's creating spaces in where everyone, and everyone means women as well, but also like so a lot of like diversity that we try to bring, because I truly believe, and I think we all agree, like diversity brings change and makes us better. And we see it when in the team, I mean, Angela there and Shani, I think there are two examples of people that when we do something that it comes from a bias, or someone brings something from a bias, they point it. And Angela is the master in that. I mean, she's a person that in a lot of meetings says, hey, who wrote this? You know, like, this doesn't make sense. Heura cannot say this. So what we do, we try to build a people's team, and this is the biggest challenge we have, to create a people's team, so old human resources, that creates spaces for everyone to bring their best in what we care. And everyone means everyone. In women, I mean, we have a lot of work, and I'm very transparent, and I think we should be. When we look at our leadership team, there is more men than women. It is a fact, and we have to change it. Are we changing it? Yes, we are. We are in the perfect ideal world. We are not. But I want to make sure that it's not just about the picture, as some political parties do, like, oh yeah, parity, 5-5, let's take the picture, we are all happy. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that an introvert can be there, that someone that thinks very differently, as our designer, for example, Sandra, hi. She's a very different, a different person and thinks very differently. And I want this kind of people to not get overwhelmed with the structure we have today. So I would say creating spaces, and then being part, as we are part sometimes with Open Arms, or we are part with Health Warriors that helps the people that in need, also like to be more involved, because being involved also like help a lot the team to get better, myself as well, obviously, and then to be more part of the solution. But I would say we are at the 10%, 15% as society, and we have a lot of room of improvement. So if you see things, like please write on Instagram, write the email. We will see it and we will try to improve it, because honestly, like community messages and criticism helps us a lot.
Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Does someone have a question for Daniela, maybe? Yeah, here. Can you bring the mic to the front?
Now, thank you for all your expositions. Daniel, I have a question for you regarding the data that you have mentioned before. As you have shown us, the main theme that I want to understand is about the activism, educating through activism on veganism on an ethical way. If we are interested on engaging people on our main purpose of defending animal rights, what do you consider that it will be the best option to do that? Well, it's also for Ed, if you know too, because you are a vegan educator too. But yeah.
Can you repeat the question?
If we do activism for the animals and we are interested on making a huge impact on people on the streets, what do you consider, if you know, it is the best way of educating people to do that?
Well, I wish I could respond to your question.
I know that it's difficult, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a few things that we know when we. First, I gotta caveat that this is not something specifically I work on. I just know a few things that may be useful, but I guess others may contribute here. we know that several of our choices are driven by our emotions and feeling, being able to feel empathy towards some animals. That is helpful for caring about them and later engaging in behaviors that do not harm them or help them actively. And we know that people tend to empathize more with animals that are closer to us phylogenetically, that is mammals first. And it's way more difficult for us to feel empathy towards other animals like fishes, for example. However, that introduces the bias that we will be caring more for animals who are less exploiting than others. So we gotta be careful about that. We also know that we tend to feel more interested and care more about for young animals compared to adult animals. So when picking some pictures that you would like to use, that could help how the message is delivered. Something very basic that another recommendation would be creating a common ground with the person that you're speaking with, that is finding some interest aspects that we can share and use this as a way to based on their interest to see how animal suffering could be relevant for them. But I don't work much on direct education. I think from a very more general perspective, I think we can have a greatest impact if we take into account the animals who are suffering the most, also the areas in which there's no much activism, those animals who are not being helped by advocates or others, and also considering if we got some good precedents of others trying to help those animals. There is, for example, we know that 99% of animals exploited by humans are animals used for human consumption. So I think that's a big reason why we may need to focus on that rather than in other areas of animal exploitation. We should also take into account that most of these animals are not terrestrial animals, are mostly aquatic animals. That's another thing for considering when more broadly in terms of our advocacy. We should also take into account that in terms of how neglected some areas are. We know that some areas of animal suffering are way more neglected than others, like it is the case of aquatic animals as well. And we can see if we got if maybe some ideas that have already worked for helping other non-human animals in other areas may work for helping these areas of suffering where animals are more neglected and tend to suffer the most. But those are considerations that do not respond to your question specifically. So I don't know if you would like to add anything.
I would just like to add something. If you're very interested in this, you just have to turn around and you have two people that do amazingly this job, which is Sergio and Maria. And they've been weekends. Okay. I was like, because I saw them and I was like, wow, they are experts for sure. Thank you for what you do, guys.
One last question, sorry. Connecting what you said before of the plant-based system, that it doesn't equal to the vegan people that it's existing in a population. That means that if not necessarily all the people that consumes plant-based products are vegan people, right? So if we reinforce the idea, I totally agree with you while supporting vegan options in non-vegan businesses, because there is an option, there is a visual, a normalization. I totally agree with that, but do you consider that is enough? Because we have the vegan option, yeah, but that doesn't equals to all the people that it's vegan, or the people that it will probably just steal and became vegan at the end. So it will be just like a parallel growth on non-vegan people just consuming more vegan options, and vegan people still being a minimal population.
We could talk a lot about this. I mean, is it enough? No. My grandma eating half the meat she was eating 2 years ago. Is it good news? It's good news. I mean, now she eats other products. She eats tofu, she eats Heura, she eats other products. Not enough, obviously not. But in parallel of uploading like my grandma and saying, hey, grandma, you're doing great. I mean, good, thank you for this recipe, etc., etc. We have to make sure that as a movement, we work to break the barriers. So we get to a point where we are uploading, but at the same time, we have the products everywhere, cheaper, better nutrition, better taste, better sustainability, better everything. So it comes to a thing that it has been said in perfect world, but let's try to create a bit of a more perfect world throughout this uploading process of many people. Like, I mean, when I became pescatarian at the very beginning, and I remember my vegetarian friends at that point uploading me and like saying, hey, do this, do that, and then they helped me throughout the process. Was it enough what I was doing? No, I was eating a lot of salmon, a lot of shrimps, a lot of animals at the end, but they helped me. And it was a long process. It was imperfect. But they helped me. So let's do this. Let's help people through information and products. And in parallel, let's work as a movement. And this means everyone. Like, it's very intersectional here on creating a system that is easy. I mean, changes have to be a bit easy because, like, sometimes we want to expect people make the change where in the same way we've done it, and a lot of people will not do it that way. So we have to ask them, how can I help you? And if it's by creating a burger with certain flavor, I will do it. Heura will make that flavor too, if this changes the food system.
Thank you for all your questions. All your answers, sorry.
I just wanted to add something to your first question, related to kind of like data. So there's an organization called Faunalytics. I'm not sure if you're familiar with them, but they do a lot of data-based investigations. And some of the stuff, it's always hard with some of this data because a lot of it's kind of subjective. So it's not always going to be spot on, but it can be quite helpful. And they just, I believe, a couple of weeks ago released a piece of research about like what is effective in terms of activism. So that could be worth checking out. And the reason, one of the, I've not gone through it all myself, but my friend did a write-up on it. So, and the thing that he was saying was that the thing that they'd said was the least effective was going into like steakhouses and shouting at people, that had a negative effect and people didn't respond to that. So I think that's something to be cautious of, as well as like how it's not just about whether or not something's effective. I guess it's also about whether or not it can be more detrimental. Because I guess we sometimes have this idea that as long as we're doing something, that something is good. And that's not always the case. Sometimes we can do things and those things can be bad. You know, not all publicity is good publicity kind of attitude. And so, but again, you know, you've always got to take some of these things with a little bit of little pinch of salt. But that is potentially a good place to start, just to see what they recommend from some of the data that they pulled anyway.
Okay, so it's 8 o'clock. It's a short question, yours?
Well, it's more a comment.
Okay,
because,
then we will close with this, okay? If you can keep it short,
okay.
The comment.
Just thank you all for your work. What I was missing, or what I was waiting for in this panel, I was like, we were always talking about like how to educate people to empathize with the animals, and I was waiting for the fact, or for the question of the education, the early education. So we are talking about kids, yeah. They are they are going to farms and learning where the animals come from, but they are not really learning the entire system behind. So this is something that that's my personal reflection from experience, and what I fight for. And I just wanted to throw this in the round and do whatever you want with it.
I mean, I totally agree. We are so disconnected from food, and like since we're kids, and I see it with my cousins. I mean, they don't know, and when I tell them, like, very persuasive, they don't know. They don't know where it comes from, that thing that they have on the plate. Some good things are happening. I'm going to share the ones we know, but we are starting to work with many state schools in Barcelona but not just to give product, obviously not just to the vegan kids, but that day everyone eats plant-based. But not just that, we are making a program which, if it works, it's intense, and it's going to go around Europe in the following years, which means how we educate kids, but also the families, and how we enter inside schools. And we will not say eat Heura in the school. The program is to connect with food and to connect with the benefits of plant-based, and like obviously sustainability, animal rights, health. It is tough. I have to say that we are part also of a European organization with most of the NGOs and companies, and we are trying to push Brussels to do many changes that affect not just these 38 schools in Barcelona, but the thousands and thousands of schools in Europe. We are far. I mean, we are far of getting that. I mean, we are still fighting if we can say cheese or milk or meat. We are still there. But I think definitely it's key. And hopefully in the following months, we can communicate many things that will be happening, not just in these 38 schools in Barcelona, but around Spain, around Europe, and how we work closely, and how in these things, like education, especially how we don't like look at our logos and we look at something else than our logos, and how we work together, because Heura can have an impact in Spain, maybe Italy, France, but many countries we don't have an impact yet. So how we work with other companies and other NGOs, and then we make a plan to go to schools and to give proposals. And like the same organization that today is doing this school program told us no 2 years ago. And even the council was not ready. They told us it's too early. And it was the sustainability, like food sustainability year. And it was too early to talk about this. But now we're there, 38 schools.
Yeah, I think the key is the authorities, right? We want to address them, and you can do your part with your company from the industry, you do your work as an influencer, and so on and so on. But I think the pressure needs to be on the authorities, 100%. Also from movements and activists.
I presume it's probably not just happening in the UK, but there's a lot of work with local councils. So I guess like schools are so important. And actually there was a piece of research just released recently which looked at how kids view animals, and how, unsurprisingly, kids don't like the idea of eating animals, but it's something they get used to as we teach them that it's okay. So it's so important, because kids have already got it in many ways. We make them unlearn what they already know. But local councils are great because they obviously do the public sector work. So it's not just schools, but hospitals, prisons, all these different places where food is provided to people and they often don't have the luxury of choice. And so, working with local councils, working with city districts who have direct control over these institutions, I think is really important, because more vegan options in schools, more children eating those vegan options, more children being given the luxury of the choice to be plant-based in schools, and things like that are really important. Because one of the issues that I always feel a bit guilty about is when I go to schools or even colleges where people are living at home, I can convince them to be vegan, but if they've got to go home and convince their parents, that's the biggest challenge of all, isn't it? So even if they just have the option to be vegan when they have autonomy and the choice to be vegan, I think that's really powerful, and would make a child feel like they had agency and the ability to act on their beliefs in a way that maybe is currently denied to them. And I think that's very empowering as well. So I agree. The kids of the future. It's a cliche for a reason,
Okay, so
can I just share
yes.
something? Like,
Yes, if
sorry,
you have
I talk a lot in general, but like my family started recycling because at school they teach me how to recycle. And hey, this goes to the yellow, this goes to the blue, and this is so powerful because it is the same that's happening now. We had that education that was important, recycling, and it came from schools to the houses. It was my cousins and myself making this change at home and pushing my grandma, hey grandma, you are the only one in the family that you are not recycling. Come on, it's easy. You have it close to your home. And now we have to do this. We have to educate and not just put the products, but educating the kids, because the kids are powerful. Sometimes no, the kids, they don't care. No, they care. I mean, and they will go home and they will say, hey, I tried this that tastes like chicken, but it's not chicken, and it's better because we don't need the chicken. And this is powerful. So we just have to make this happening in many places around the world, and not just in like rich cities, but like in places where like they don't even have the privilege of having internet, but these places also have to have these options, and pushing until one day where like this is normal. And at schools, as I was at COP26, and the normal thing at COP26 to give to people attending a climate emergency, it was plant-based food. Was it? Was not. Half of it was plant-based. In schools, we're educating kids, hopefully to do better in the future and to be better individuals and also like work as a collective. So we should give actually like food that has a positive impact. It will happen. And also at COP 27 or 28 or 29, maybe one day they realize that serving meat doesn't make sense in a climate emergency summit, but step by step. Let's keep some optimism there.
Okay, yes, so don't worry. Now we finish with this. Thank you very much to the participants. I think everything was very interesting. We had the perfect mix between the researcher, private business, and also education on veganism. And I think that many of the things that we talked about are still open to debate, and probably if everyone on the public had talked, now we could stay here for hours and we could hear different opinions. But I also think that this is a good thing. This means that the movement is alive and that we still have so many things to work on, and that it's a good thing. So many thanks to all of you, to the CAE for organizing the event, the UPF, and especially to the public, because it's the most important part of the public that it's here and the one that will see this later on YouTube or on social media, because without you we cannot keep doing these events. So thank you very much to all of you.